Hey, welcome to Disorder Support, our very first episode. We're super excited to be here. Hopefully, you can watch us grow as we grow the community. So, Disorder Support is all about supporting veterans, first responders, and their spouses in the chaos that can ensue when leaving military or active service of any kind and transitioning into the civilian world. This can be any disorder from as open as PTSD, having real world interactions that are not great, right? Or as something as small as insomnia that's affecting your daily life. And the idea here is to just create a community of folks that can deal with it and talk to it outside the VA so we can work together as a community to make us stronger. Right, I'm one of your hosts. My name is Kyle Gauk. I served 4 years active duty in 5th Special Forces Group as a supply NCO. And your other host is Zach. Cool. So, fun fact, everybody, I was the first one in fifth group. Zach then came in and worked alongside me. We worked together for a while in the military. Then I was the first one to get out. He stayed in longer than me because he's not as smart as I am. And I got a job in the aerospace industry. And then when he got out, I helped him get a job in the aerospace industry. So we've been working together for a very, very long time, Zach and I. And I'm very excited to introduce our very first guest, someone who has always been close to me for a very long time as well. Brian Palmer. I've known Brian since middle school. We've been really close growing up together. After high school, Brian joined the United States Navy. He served from 2009 to 2018. He has 2 deployments to the Middle East. He was a gas turbine mechanic stationed out of Hawaii, out of Pearl Harbor. Ended up getting out as a second class petty officer, which, for those of you who are not a seaman like myself, is an E5. I had to ask, I did not know the answer. After getting out, Brian, while being in the reserves, right, did the military honor guard for quite a while, did over 500 veteran funerals. So the idea of mental support for veterans is very close to Brian as it is to myself and Zach for other reasons which we can get into. And then now Brian serves as a paramedic firefighter in the fire service in South Florida. Nice to have you on the show, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Thanks for having me, Kyle, Zach. I think it's a great thing that you guys are doing, starting a podcast to help with veterans transitioning from the military into the civilian world. I think that there's a lot of complexities that goes along with that transition, and it can be a challenging time for anybody. You get advice from people in the military who've had long drawn out careers in the military who haven't actually transitioned to the civilian world. They think they know what the civilian world's like, and they think they know what the VA and the different benefits out here are, but I think that there's a lot to be said uh, taking advice from a veteran who has successfully transitioned to the civilian world. There are going to be challenges that you're going to face. There are going to be things that you need to overcome, and there's help out there, and there's things that we'll get into on the podcast that I think are really supportive and really helpful, and it can make for a very positive thing. So thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no, glad you're here. Um,
Pleasure.
and it's so true, right? There's a million resources out there, and some of them will work for you, and some of them won't work for you. You know what I mean? Depending on who you are and what your personality is. And it's different, right? The challenges we face coming out as veterans are completely different than a challenge that a college student would face, right? Going to the workforce for the first time. Um, so yeah, honestly, thanks for being here. So
Mhm.
I guess the first thing we want to talk about really was how was your specific transition from military to civilian life?
Okay. So my transition from the military to civilian life was one of complexity, right? So I was stationed in Pearl Harbor for 4 years on active duty attached to the USS Port Royal, and my ship deployed a couple times. So then when I was coming up towards the end of my service, I had about, let's say, a year left when you go to select orders, and you got to make your decision if you're going to stay in or if you're going to get out to the civilian world. Well, I chose at 3 years when I looked at the orders available that I was going to transition to civilian world. Obviously, I went and seeked help and seeked advice from the military, and a lot of them were, "Hey, you should just stay in. There's nothing out there in the civilian world. You should just stay in and do a whole career here. You're really good at the military. Just just stay in. There's
So
nothing out there for you.
so when I went to transition out, I forget what they call it, the retention officer, right? He pulls me
Hmm.
into his office and he's like, "Hey man, I've got a deal for you." It's like, if you stay in. I'm like, "Okay, cool. What's the deal?" He goes, "I've got a fucking blanket, right?" With the fifth group logo on it and a $1,700 check with your name on it. And how do you not laugh at that? You know
You
what I
should have
mean?
done it.
No, stop. How do you not laugh at
Come
that?
on.
A blanket and a $1,700 check. Like, oh
Hey,
man, retention's not the
Yeah.
best in the military.
I would have done it for less. I should say
Yeah,
thank
you,
you
you
for
did do
less.
it for less.
I didn't get anything for my reenlistment.
Oh, good,
They're like,
nice.
hey, you want to deploy again? Just reenlist.
Way to play the
Like,
game.
okay.
Yeah, so I remember being really stressed out towards the end of my career when it came to finally making that decision to get out. And once I had made that decision and I had turned in my paperwork saying, "Hey, I'm not re-enlisting," I remember there was a real like negative connotation that I kind of walked around with, like a chip on your shoulders, like I let down my fellow service members. My chiefs and my supervisors were very disappointed, it seemed, to see me getting out, and that was something that I had to overcome personally.
Yeah.
But I did a bunch of research and I tried to figure out what kind of programs the military had. One of them being a transition assistance program I was able to attend. They offer them worldwide, but the one I went to was in Pearl Harbor, and it's a week-long course where you wear business attire and you prepare a resume and you practice interviews, and they talk about VA disability ratings. They talk about different programs out there to help you purchase a home. There's a lot of programs out there, like there's a few programs, Troop to Teachers. So there's a program where if you've done 10 years in the military, you can transition into being a teacher if that's what you choose to do. There's one called Troops to Truckers, where if you want to go and become a semi truck driver, and travel the United States and do whatever you want to do, you can do that. You can walk out making 50, 60, 70, 80,000 plus, all the way up to six figures, working with different truck companies where they'll pay for your school, they'll pay for your transition, they'll pay for your moves. There's a lot of programs that I learned about in that TAPS
So that's
class.
that's
But
that's pretty cool. We didn't. I don't know, Zach, if you had anything different. We didn't have anything like that at Fort Campbell.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so
I
we had like
I
we
went to a
had the
class.
tabs.
Yeah, it was a TAPS class. I went to a TAPS class, but there was no business attire. There was no interviews. It
It
was
was casual.
it was yeah. Well, actually, I think I wore my uniform, and it was like a 2 hour class. They helped me retype my resume. They helped me create a LinkedIn profile, and then that was really all I remember about you. So that's really cool that the Navy did all that for you. That's way different than what my experience was. And also, I can't like, so I was fortunate, right? I was deployed, and then I trans is rare. My situation was very rare. I'll give it that. But I was deployed, and then I transitioned out of the military a month after I returned from a deployment, which is super fast. Like that doesn't normally happen. So there was really no time for me to feel like I was letting anyone else down, right? I was just so focused on ETSing and all the stuff that comes with returning all of your gear and all, you know what I mean? You have appointment after appointment where they want to check you out at every doctor's office and do a psych eval and all that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, that had to, especially like when you're thinking about the unknown, right? You're moving from the military to the civilian world, right? So you're moving into a very big unknown, and now you're walking around for the next couple of months while you're ETSing out of the military, like feeling like you let people down. That's got to be really tough. Like you're in a
Yeah,
bad
I
space,
had the
and then you're
same
going into the unknown.
I had the same thing you did though. I was coming out of a deployment, my fourth deployment, that I came out of. I had to ETS a month later. So it was pretty interesting as well, where I had a week to transitioning out of the army. So like they had like one job fair that I went to, and that was about it. And then the classes where they set up your resume, set up your LinkedIn account and everything else, and say, hey, basically this is all you need, and you're good to go.
Yeah, that's pretty much all. So Brian, do you think that kind of that negative feeling came from the other service members around you about you
so
getting out,
yeah,
or was that just something you were dealing with internally, or you just took on the burden yourself?
So I think it had a lot to do with insecurities that some of my supervisors in the military had. Some of them that were heading towards the end of their career, and they had had a life in the military, which is a great life. I mean, it's something. If you do a career in the military, it's a phenomenal thing, and I support all active duty service members and veterans and anybody who agreed to put on that uniform. It's an honorable thing, but I think that there is some unknowns, so I think they were judging me based on information that they weren't aware of. They thought they wanted the best for me because they cared about me as a fellow service member. They wanted to support me and helped, but they were judging me on information that they were ignorant of. I feel that they just didn't understand what the civilian world opportunities were or what kind of things were available to them, so they chose, I guess you could call it, the safer route, which, I mean, obviously the military service is
It's
not
not safe, yeah, but no,
the
yeah,
safer
I get
route,
what you're saying. It's
but
the
but a
stability,
more, it's like
right?
it's the road versus the road of
Right,
the unknown,
right.
which
So when
can
you
be challenging.
say judging you, judging you in that you could fail, like there's a big opportunity, they think you might fail, right? Because
Oh
they just
yeah.
don't know.
Well, it's unfortunate. I think that when you are going to make that decision to transition out of the military, you cannot take that decision and just make it lightly on a whim. I think that it needs to be a well thought out decision, and you need to make a plan for the transition because there are statistics out there. Obviously the veteran suicide rate we all know of, the 21 a day. But I
22,
would,
I think.
you
Yeah.
know, I would be more worried about the veteran homelessness, the drug addiction,
You
the
think there's a financial aspect of it too, Brian? Like if you're
for
financially not
sure.
stable.
For sure. That's why I feel like if you are going to make a transition out of the military, if I could do it again, it's something you need to do at least a year prior. Like I understand you guys all both got out within a month of, making your final decision. But I think if you're going to get out, you need to know at least a year prior so that you can put, at that point, you kind of need to go on a budget. You need to lock yourself down to uh, eating on base and staying put and not really. I understand you want to go out with your friends and you want to, live our young lives that we had from 19 to 23 and kind of go out and enjoy the the places you are because obviously the military allows us to travel and see different parts of the world that you may not get the opportunity to see again. But the more physical, financially responsible you can be in that last year to really stow away a little bit of a savings, I feel that's really beneficial because, when you get out, I don't, I was lucky. I went and moved in with my parents. I moved in with my mom for for about 2 weeks because going back to your parents after you've served in the military and you've lived on your own, that was near
It's
impossible
tough.
for me.
Yeah.
I was like, I need to get my own apartment like immediately. And what allowed me to do that was having a plan and actually being enrolled in college immediately when I walked out of the service. I had a little bit of a plan as far as I knew that I wanted to go to school. So I chose to work full time while going to school full time at Palm Beach State College in South Florida and start attending classes. But that allowed me to get BAH using the post 9/11 GI Bill, which is a really important benefit that I think veterans need to research. Even if you're not going to go to regular college, I've probably made the best use of that post 9/11 GI Bill than
Well,
almost anybody that I know.
genuinely, I'm glad you're bringing this up because I wanted to talk about this. So the post 9/11, anyone listening to this is probably extremely aware, but the post 9/11 covers up to 3 years or 36 months of college post service, right?
Hmm.
And they also give you a full E5 with dependents, active duty, pay salary while you're in
No,
school if
not
you
not
go to.
salary, not salary.
Oh, sorry,
They
sorry,
give
not
you
salary, but
they,
it's
they
it's
give you the basic allowance for housing, the BAH
Correct.
for an
Thank you.
E5 with dependents.
With dependents.
Yes.
Thank you. It's the BAH.
Based on the zip code of the school that you're at, and it
Correct.
has to be in-person classes.
So
When
there
you
is a
go
caveat to
online,
that.
you have to make sure that over 50% is in person
Right. It has to be
for it to be considered.
51% of your classes have to be in person, and then 49% can be remote classes, and you'll still get the full BAH. And it's also a good
Right.
point you brought up with the zip code, because I went to school in New York City and my BAH was like $4,700 a month, right? Versus if you go to school in like Missouri, it's probably going to be $1,200 a month, right? So where you go to school is also important. But I'm glad you brought that up, because Brian here, I think, is the king of how to use the GI Bill. So obviously, being in the fire service, Brian, are you, just blanket yes or no, are you required to have a degree just to get into the fire service?
No.
Right. And so therefore you were able to leverage your GI Bill in ways that most veterans don't. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, like Kyle said, the GI Bill covers you for 36 months. Now, I have had friends that have been super successful with those 36 months because it's a time thing with the military, post 9/11 GI Bill. It is not the amount of credits. I've had friends that have gotten double bachelor's degrees, one in choir and music, and done that in the 36 months, completely paid for by their veteran GI Bill, the post 9/11 GI Bill. I myself chose to get out. I was going to regular classes at Palm Beach State, just getting my associate's degree because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was working in an animal rescue full time, taking care of dogs, walking dogs, taking care of horses, anything that would make ends meet. So I got a job making like $17 an hour walking dogs, and I was going to school, and I had really, I mean, I had a plan. I knew that I had experience in the jet engines and working on jet engines, fuel systems, boilers, and things from the military, and I knew I wanted to transition to that, but I also knew I didn't have education. And one of the things I learned from transitioning from the military to the civilian world is that all these military credentials that you earn, the classes you do, and everything like that in the 4 years or 8 years or 20 years you choose to do, they're not as valuable as you
They're pretty
think. You
much
know, I mean,
useless.
I'm not
Yeah,
trying to downplay
they're
all.
useless.
I'm, I'm
They're
not. I'm not.
useless to the civilian world as an official
Well,
certification of being able to do
I
the
was gonna
position.
say, guys, too. So like when you do a reenlistment too, you can actually gain another year of schooling. So it's not just the 36 months. There's actually another year if you do a reenlistment as a soldier. They actually do give you another year to go to school.
So you can get
no.
full 4 years. That's
Yeah.
cool. That's good to know.
Well,
Okay,
that's
so
really cool. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
I didn't know that either. That's great. That's honestly really good news. And I like that, because 36 month for what is classified as a 4 year degree is bullshit in my opinion. So that's good. Although it's stupid, you have to put your life on the line again for a full degree. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Does it make sense?
So okay, so Brian, moving past
Yeah.
that, what else did you do with your GI Bill?
Okay. So, continuing on, as I worked on my general ed courses, I was working at an animal ranch, and then I started work on jet engines at Palm Beach International, detailing planes and doing different things like that. So I was like, okay, uh, let me see what I can do here with my experience. And I tried to get a job working on airframes or working on turbines or anything that I had experience on. And I'd go and talk to them and I go, hey, what kind of certifications they need? They're like, you need airframe and power plant. You need an A&P from the FAA, and that's what you need to work here and different things. So I said, okay, well, this is what I've been doing in the military. And they're like, you need to go to school, right? You need to go to school, you need to go get a certification. And so I started looking at different certifications and how long I could take programs for. And I learned in the GI Bill that you could take things from AC and R Tech, working on air conditioning, to refrigerators, to anything you want to do. You want to be an electrician? There's programs where there's actually paid apprenticeships where they'll give you a full salary plus your BAH plus allow you to transition. But I chose to try EMT school because I was a shipboard firefighter, and I was like, well, I know I like the fire side of things. Let me give this medical thing a try. So I first went to EMT school and used 3 months of my GI Bill in EMT school. And then after that, I transitioned to paramedic school, which is another 14-month program. So I did 14 months of paramedic school following the 3 months of EMT. And then I transitioned to my final program, which was the Fire Academy, which is 3 months full time. So it's basically almost 2 years of schooling completed when you finish becoming a firefighter paramedic and being eligible to get a job in the state of Florida. That's how it works here. And that's typically how it works in most programs throughout the nation. Now, once I've completed those schools, right? It's just like the military in the civilian world when it comes to getting a job with a city or a government um, entity. It takes time, right? So even if you have done everything and dotted every I and crossed every T, you could be waiting 3 to 6 months to get hired from a fire department. At least back in 2017, when I started looking into the fire service, it was not easy to get a job because of COVID and because of different things. Our market has opened up, and it's more, it's more likely that you'll get hired faster now. But when I was going through school, I wasn't sure how long it was going to take me to get a job. So after I completed school, now I was no longer getting BAH, right? Because once you leave school, if you don't stay enrolled
The
in
money
school,
stops.
you the
Yeah.
money stops, and that
And you
that
still got to
adds
pay
to
your
the
bills.
challenge. Yeah, you still got to pay your bills. So it's funny that Kyle brings up my like weird path of how things I found, because I'm sitting here at the end of Fire Academy, right? And it's December, right about Christmas time. I have a son who at the time in 2017 is 2 years old, right? And I'm nervous. I'm like, okay, well, money's been good. I've been putting money away, saving a little bit and paying my bills and stuff like that. But Christmas is coming and bills are coming and my rent's due
And
and
your
what am I gonna
BH
do?
just dried up.
And my BAH just dried up.
What's
So
your home life like at that
So
point?
how? Good.
okay. So for me in 2017, I was married. I had been married for 2 years and we had a 2-year-old son. Um, my 2-year-old son Grayson. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, I need to find something, right? I need to get this BH. I still have plenty of benefits left, but I wasn't sure, how to utilize them effectively. So I go on Google and I start looking, and Google's free for everybody, like Kyle said earlier. Um, I
My
started
Google's
looking. I
as
said,
free as yours is.
I started looking for programs to use my GI Bill, and I found this ad, and it was an ad in Fort Lauderdale, and it says, "Trade in your military uniform for a bathing suit and flip flops. Go from open water to dive master in like 72 days." And I was like, what what is this program, right? And I had just
Yeah.
it's crazy because right before that, like how we're talking about the challenges of the transition, I applied as a paramedic at one of these hospitals here in South Florida. I go to the interview, I kill the interview. I do awesome. I go to the next level of the interview. Then I go to the final interview, and they literally look at my resume. They go, Brian, we look at your resume. We look how qualified you are. You're very good at interviewing and stuff. We'd love to have you, but we think you're going to get picked up by a fire department right away, so we're not going to hire you.
I remember this. I do.
And I was like devastated
Like I
because
need
I
the
was like,
money. Like
I go, I go, I, I need to pay my bills for the next 2 to 3 months. I
yeah.
mean, I knew I was getting hired, but they didn't know I was getting hired, and I was like struggling, and I was concerned, and I was like, well, what do I do now? So I just so happened to go home, and I go on Google, and I see this trading your military uniform for a bathing suit and flip flops. And so I leave a voicemail. I go, hey, I'm interested in this program. Can you call me back? Talk to me about it. No call back. The next morning, it's 9:30 in the morning. I call again. Hey, this is Brian, blah blah blah. They're like, yeah, we have a program. It's open water, then advanced open water, all these classes, all the way through to dive master, which is the first level of being a professional diver. And they go, we give you, $6,000 worth of dive gear and all this stuff, and you get BAH the whole time you're in the program. But we have a program starting in April. And I was like, I go, oh, well, I'm thinking I'm going to get hired at the fire department. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to be available in April. And they just so happen to tell me, they go, hey, well, congratulations. We have a program starting today, but there's a lot of paperwork and stuff that you got to do beforehand. There's a physical, there's everything. And I go, I, and by the way, it's 7 days a week. So like you have to have nothing going on for the next 70 days. And I go, okay, if I can do all this paperwork today and come in, can you ask the dive master if I can start? So she calls me back. She goes, Brian, the dive master says if you can get here by noon today and you have all this stuff done, the physical, the paperwork, and blah, 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 you can start. I call my dad and I ask him to watch Grayson. And then call my wife and I go, hey, babe, Kaylee, what's up? I'm starting dive school today. And she goes, what? You just finished the fire academy like 4 days ago. What are you talking about? Right. And I go, I know, but I finally found a way to like not have to worry about our bills for the next 3 months. So
And I get to
like I
become a
gotta do
dive
it,
master.
I gotta do it. I gotta do it.
Yeah, how do you
So
beat
it's
that?
funny. The story gets even funnier. So I dropped my son off and at my dad's, thankfully he's retired and stuff. So I was able to leave him and he was able to watch him every day when I was at school. Well, I I then go down to Fort Lauderdale, show up to this dive school, and they have $6,000 worth of dive gear on the table for me, and they're like, "Yeah, Mr. Palmer, here's your gear, here's your books, here's everything you need from open water to dive master." And then we did intros. Right, it's noon. It's me, a Marine named Dan, and another Marine. I can't even remember his name now. Uh, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm from." One guy's like, "I'm from Maine. I was Army EOD, and I want to do ice diving and stuff like that. I've been planning this for 2 years. I'm living down here in an RV, and this is what I wanted to do for a long time." The other guy's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna open up a dive shop in Thailand. I've been planning this." The lady's name was Marianne. I've been planning this with Marianne for about 18 months now. I was like, yeah, so I was home this morning. I picked up the phone, I called, and here I
And
am,
here
like,
I am. They
ready
let
to
me
teach
in.
this program. And they were like, what do you mean, here you are? I go, they
Well,
go,
I
you
showed
you
up.
don't want to be a professional diver? So, like I said, I showed up to dive school. Everybody else had these grand plans to be there, and I was just doing it to, utilize my GI Bill and get that housing allowance. So I did open water to dive master, completed my dive master program, and as soon as I finished my dive master program, I sat down for my interview with the fire department. And so at the interview for the fire department, my final interview, they were like, "Hey, Brian, we liked your resume, we liked everything. Is there anything that you would like to add before we hire you, or before we consider hiring you at our fire department?" And I said, well, actually, I happen to know that your fire department has a dive team that I've been super interested in for years. I totally bullshitted on that, and I was like, but I went and got every certification that I could possibly need to be on your dive team. And they're like, wow, I did open water, advanced open water, deep diver, night diver, public safety diver, rescue diver, all these different certifications and stuff that were covered in my program utilizing the GI Bill, that they were like, wow, do you want to run our dive team? I was like, we'll talk about that once I get started.
Yeah,
And
that's
they were really, it was really a benefit that I was able to use during my interview. And, as soon as I got on with the fire department, I was immediately added to the dive team and received a dive incentive pay and stuff. So it actually, just turned out to be a really lucky thing that I chose to go to that dive program.
yeah. So
Um,
really, what became a means, or what was a means to an end, just to help pay bills and do something cool with the money, ended up
mhm.
paying off in the long run. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it was it was really beneficial for me. Really helped me with the fire department, and it actually showed like a certain level of commitment to their department because they just happened to have a dive team that I knew about. So after I finished dive school, I got started on at the fire department, and the fire department's a very paramilitary organization. So going through the fire academy and then moving into a new hire academy is very militant in a way. They call it paramilitary, where it's boot camp style. They have instructors that can be similar to drill instructors, but it seems when you get hired that they treat you with a certain level of respect for being a veteran. They you know, seem to treat you as if, hey, you deserve to be here a little bit. So you do get a certain amount of respect and things from first responders. I think that we're closer to first responders than we are to other civilians. I think you know, I like to call it in the first responder world, trauma bonded, right? So we run 911 calls every day in the fire service that are very traumatic incidences, and I didn't realize before I got into the fire service how much traumatic stuff I would see uh once I got hired here. I thought in the military I had saw, very traumatic things or things that would, stick with most people in their head and cause things like post-traumatic stress syndrome or disorder. uh, and I thought I had seen a decent amount of stuff in the military, and I didn't realize just how much the first responders in the civilian world see. Going to homicides, suicides, shootings, stabbings, car accidents can be very traumatic. And honestly, the calls that have stuck with me in the fire service are ones that you wouldn't expect. Ones where you're responding to somebody's house for a sick person. You show up and there's no furniture. There's three kids on the floor playing with just themselves. No adult in sight. And you have a 3-year-old who's the oldest kid watching these other infants, and you're like, what's going on here? Where's the adults? Where's the support? Where's the supervision? Where's somebody who can get this kid a bottle or food or water?
Yeah.
It's like, the signs of neglect and abuse and different things that you see as
Yeah.
a first responder can be
So
really traumatic.
yeah, so that definitely I wanna get into that. We have a whole section for that, so we'll put that on pause for a second. Um, but that's definitely something we want to dig into. So what? So you got hired at the fire, sir. You finished your you used your GI Bill for the dive certification.
Okay.
You got hired
Yep.
at the fire service. Okay.
hmm
And then did you use your GI Bill for anything else?
Yeah, so then once I got hired on the fire department, you learn about different avenues to get promoted, different positions you can take within the fire service, whether you want to go be a lieutenant or a driver or a captain or a battalion chief one day. You need to there's a certain level of expectation to an education. Like you asked me, do I need a degree directly to get hired at the fire department? The answer is no. But if you want to promote, in South Florida, it's becoming a common expectation to have an associate's degree to get to the rank of lieutenant or captain. So I had to go and get my associate's degree. I continued to use my GI Bill and get an associate's degree in emergency medical services with Health Career Institute. And then after that, if you want to promote higher up in the fire department to the level of battalion chief or fire chief one day, it's becoming a common expectation here in South Florida that you get a bachelor's degree. So I decided to continue on um, to get my bachelor's degree in public
You
administration.
wanted to advance your career, right? That's what you're looking
Yeah,
for, to
yeah,
advance your
yeah.
career.
For career advancement, if you want to take on career advancement, chose to continue to get my bachelor's degree in public administration with Braxton College. And in between that, in between the associates and the bachelors, lost track of, you know, ways to burn through my GI Bill so that I could continue to collect housing allowance, and I decided to go down the avenue of getting a gunsmith associate's degree from Saronin Desert Institute. That was a program I did for actually only about 3 or 4 months, and I chose to uh, head towards the fire degrees instead, just because I figured it'd be better utilization of my time and my benefits. So I backed out of that. But that was I thought I knew a decent amount about firearms, and that was like a
A
junior
whole new
sniper
world.
school. They got you going through waging and making bullets and making rounds, and that's one of your projects, and like disassembling firearms, rebuilding them, and then molding them, and it's pretty wild the different programs that you can get into with the post 9/11 GI Bill.
So nice.
Found
So
it
so I just want to recap for everyone, right? So God, 36 months, and I feel like you did a lifetime worth of schooling with this thing. So when you got out, you used it to pay for EMT. You used it to pay
Mm-hmm.
for paramedic. You used it to pay for the
Mm-hmm.
fire academy. You used it to pay for dive master certification. You used it to pay for about halfway, maybe a little bit more, of a gunsmithing certification or associate's degree. You used it to finish an associate's degree, and you used it to get majority of the way through a bachelor's degree. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I
Yeah.
I think if there was an award for best used GI Bill, I think we would hand it to you right here and now. I don't
Yeah.
have anything to give you, but if I did, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
definitely a fantastic use of the GI Bill. Absolutely.
So you were just living off it, right? You were just living off the GI Bill the whole time. Was your
Well,
source,
yeah.
main source of income?
For some of the time, yeah, most of the time that was my main source of income. That plus doing the military funerals for the Navy Reserves. When you do military funerals for the Navy Reserves, you get paid like a drill. So every funeral you do, or every day of funerals, I should say you do, because sometimes we do two or three or four in a single day. You get paid like a drill cycle, like a drill day. So you get like $100 or a couple $100 for a day of services. So I was using that along with other part-time jobs. I was doing nighttime security to study for paramedic school, and I was just making ends meet. And that can be an extremely challenging thing to do when it comes to civilian world because, like we talked about earlier, those certifications that you get in the military, those can open up doors and they can be a bonus to try to help you get employed, but a lot of the times they want official certifications from the civilian world. You know, they want college degrees, they want official things recognized by the FAA or whatever regulatory source is out there. It's important, I think, when you're in the military to do some research if you're going to stay in your field of study that you've had experience in the military. Make sure that you go and research the civilian world and say, hey, what certifications do I really need to have? Are there certifications I can get in the military and transition and actually be effective with? Or is it I need to go make a plan to go to school?
Yeah,
And I think that's important.
definitely. And I know we had mentioned earlier, Zach had brought it up, the financial aspect of transitioning can be one of the toughest things, right? And Brian can attest to this. When I first got out, it wasn't in New York City. I moved back to South Florida. And I thought I could go to school full time, live off BAH. I was working in a cabinet shop at the time. Um, and with my temper from the military, I lost that job. And I was homeless for a while. And I was still collecting BAH, but it just wasn't enough to cover all my bills and everything I had that I thought I could handle. I was living in my car for a little while. I slept at my school for a little while. Shout out to FAU and the FSA team for letting me use the office and the cot in there. With my dog, mind you, although I had less responsibility than Brian, I didn't have a wife and a kid. But Brian can attest, there's nights I slept on an air mattress in his living room just to get by.
Yeah.
So the financial aspect can be huge, right? Using your GI Bill as effectively as possible is definitely the way to go. And like I said, I'd give you a fucking gold star if I could, because I did not use my GI Bill that well. I kind of blew through it, which I imagine
Yeah.
most I want to say soldiers, but just servicemen and women do. Um,
Yeah, I think that if I was given advice to a service member that was transitioning out and planning on using the GI Bill, I would tell them to make sure that they have enough money to cover the off seasons. And what I mean by that is when you're going to school with this GI Bill, when you take Christmas vacation, when those 2 weeks off of school and stuff seem like a great thing to everybody and you're not getting paid, it's something to consider. You need to make sure when you speak to your school, are they a yellow ribbon school? Which a yellow ribbon school is a school that accepts the GI Bill and allows you to use the GI Bill to pay a higher uh,
Tuition
like a
rate.
higher price. If their tuition rate is higher than what the military is willing to accept or pay, they'll cover the difference. It's like a grant or a scholarship of sorts. But there's plenty of yellow ribbon schools out there, and so just make sure that when you pick a school, you pick one that has a VA representative or that's VA accredited and set up so that most VA accredited programs will have a VA rep that you can call and speak to and say, hey, if I take these courses for this amount of time and then I get out of school for summer or winter vacation or spring break, uh, do I continue to get my BAH or is there going to be a gap? And because that gap can really hurt you when you all of a sudden go from making 3,000 to 1,500 that month. Well, your rent didn't change. Your
Right.
rent is still whatever you decided to do. So you better make sure that your rent is maybe less than that 1,500 to make sure you can cut. You know you've got to live well within your means. You know
And were
you
you
can
making less or more? Were you making less currently than you
um
were making in the army? Or no, I'm sorry, in the army, but in the
maybe
navy?
yeah. So so No, I guess I would probably say that I was making the same as far as like if you looked at my taxable income. But I think that it's important to understand that, like to tell you in the military, oh, everything's covered, your housing's covered, your food's covered, your different things like that. But but that's not really true because our salaries are so low in the military. They're so below par of the civilian world that um, when you weigh everything out, it's almost the same. But the difference is you're responsible for so much more in the civilian world. When you choose to transition out, you need to make sure that your main things are covered. You need to make sure your house is covered, whatever it is, whether you're living in an RV, a van, living in a hotel, you're living in a rental house, or you've purchased a home, whatever you got to do, whatever home is to you, you got to make sure your home is covered first. After that, you have to make sure that you have your core food covered. So if you're eating top ramen, that's fine. I've been there. I've done it. I've lived the struggle before where, you're eating peanut butter and jelly and top ramen. That's okay because you're building for your future. But you need to make sure that you cover it before you go buying Ruth Chris and stuff, or going out to a nice steakhouse. Make sure that all your bills are covered. Your house is covered first. Your food's covered. You need to make sure you have a reliable source of transportation, unless you're living at a school where that's where you go. But a reliable source of transportation is expected. When it comes to getting a job, you need to be able to get yourself there. So that's another really important core thing to be covered. And then make sure you have your bills. People are going to expect you to have a cell phone. That's just normal now. Internet is a really important tool for education. It's also a really important tool for professional networking and jobs and stuff. You can get remote jobs, but if you don't have the internet at your home, uh, it's a challenge. So that's almost one of those core things now. So I think
Yes.
it's really important to live well within your means. Do not ever plan on that GI Bill money. Like that GI Bill money needs to be set aside every month, cover your core expenses. Don't be profiting off the GI Bill. Don't expect to utilize that to sustain your life. You need to make sure that that sustains you through school, and any extra money you get, whether it be through a textbook stipend, or you're paying $1,000 for rent and you're making 3,000 from the GI Bill. Take that $2,000 and put it away and just pay your core expenses. And then after you burn through your GI Bill, or you hit those gaps or those questionable employments where, like I said, I finished all my schooling and I didn't have a position to start. Like it wasn't time to start yet. You need to make sure you have that extra cushion. Uh,
Yeah.
$10,000 doesn't go as far as it used to. Even $100 doesn't go as far as it used to. But it's important to think for the future. If you're going to transition out, you have to make your own plans for the future so you don't end up like some of my friends who have struggled with depression and chose to take their own lives and stuff because once you become homeless and once you become, you know, unemployed and it's really easy to get down on yourself and really easy to get depressed and get into a dark hole that it's hard to dig someone out of because a lot of us don't have that extra money. They don't have those extra friends, the network and stuff to reach out to. I can't you know We can only call so many friends and go, hey man, I need to borrow some money so many times before people get tired of hearing it because they don't have the extra money themselves. You have to be self sufficient in the civilian world, and that can be a challenge. When you're
Yeah.
when you're used to taking care of each other in the military, and the military having these extra resources that aren't always available to you in the civilian world.
And that's a fantastic segue. So you did an amazing job with your GI Bill, right? That's evident. You were successful in going to school and landing a job in the fire service. Um, so it all seems pretty optimistic, right? But obviously that's the front, right? That's the face. So when you pull back the curtain, knowing what you know now today at your age with your experience, this having been what a good 10 years you've been out, well, not counting your reserve time, um, but a good amount of time you've been just strictly civilian, a good 5 years, right? What would you have done differently to put yourself in a better position today?
Yeah, so some things that I would have done differently to put myself in a better position is have a more delineated plan at the time of transition. I would have a career picked out or have a school that I would directly use. I would make sure to secure my schooling. Once I secured my schooling, whatever program I was going to do when I was going to transition, I would have jumped right into EMT school, right into fire school, right into paramedic school directly out of the military. But I would have picked something if that was the avenue I was going to chase. I would have the schools lined up so that I could boom, 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 transition right out. I would definitely file my VA disability claims or any kind of things you're going to do while you're still active duty because there are things when we were in the military. I don't know about you guys, but it was always frowned upon to go to medical. It was always frowned
Always.
upon
We call
to
them
seek
sick call
treatment.
warriors. Yep.
It was always frowned upon to have any kind of mental disorders or any kind of like questionable things. If you're stressed about uh, a high op tempo, or the high operational tempo of the deployment, you can't get leave. I remember my leave getting denied a couple times. I almost didn't get to make it to my own mom's wedding, like when she got remarried to my stepfather. I almost didn't get to make it to a lot of family events and stuff, and it was suck it up and deal with it.
I
Your
think most
service
people are
member.
scared to get kicked out of the military if they find out that you have a disorder of some type. I think that's like a fear.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wish I had known, right? Because I didn't. The reason you asked me earlier, have I ever made a claim about a disability or anything? So when I was transitioning, I was very nervous about what a claim could do. I thought that a claim could
Impact
limit
you.
your job, impact you negatively,
Yeah.
limit your job opportunities, limit your job market, and that is true in very, very, very few cases, right? Like for a pilot with a medical screening, sure, that might be a challenge. There are things that you need to research if you're going to follow in certain job markets, but generally speaking, you know 80 to 90% of jobs are not impacted in the least whatsoever from a disability rating, and it can actually greatly benefit you from doing it while you're in the military, because not only does it give you an opportunity to properly fill out your medical records the way we should have been doing it for the entire 4 years, because if I had known what I knew now, I would have day one at boot camp. Every time I had the flu, or every time I got sick, or every time, when you're in boot camp and you got a fever of 103 and everybody's coughing around you and stuff, and you're like, I don't want to go get Tylenol because I don't want to get pushed back a phase in boot camp and stuff. I 100% would have went and at least got it documented in my medical records, because there are things, every time you're exposed to something. I was exposed to different types of lube oil and fuel, and I used to get dermatitis on my hands and stuff from the desert and from working on these lube oil and fuel systems. And then when I got out of the military, and I'm like, no, I've had dermatitis quite a few times. They're like, well, it's not in your medical record. And I'm like, they always told us it would go away. They said, don't worry about it. I got anthrax vaccines, smallpox vaccines, all these vaccines that the military chose to do, and different things like that. And which is not a problem. I mean, it's things that we need while we're serving. But if you have any kind of negative lasting effects from your service, whether it be, hey, I used to work 18-hour shifts every day in a hot engine room. And, because of that, because of the loud engines and stuff like that, you can have issues like tinnitus where you have ringing in your ears. I used to refuel helicopters and do all these things, and you're around loud noises, and you get woken up 3, 4, 5 times a night, different things that can be really, have really lasting effects
Yeah.
on anybody.
There's
That's just the
there's
conditions
a
of service.
I'm gonna get this wrong, so I don't know exactly the age, but there's a stat out there that'll show you that people who serve in the military have a shorter lifespan than a civilian who's never served. And
Hmm.
if you serve, I think 20 years or greater, you're more likely to die in your 60s, versus an average human lifespan is around 80, right? So I mean, it's true, and I think that is a main part of the fact that the hazards that we go through as servicemen and women, right? But also the fact that we don't go to sick call because it does have a very strong negative connotation to go. And you feel judged, right? And people make jokes. Like I said, we used to call them sick call warriors, right? I never went. And I have really
It's like
bad.
you blended.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of things that are not in my medical record that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Pain in my wrist and my knees and my elbows and my shoulders and my ankles, right? I have trouble staying in shape now because I can't fully, I can't use a barbell without being in severe pain in my left wrist, because it just doesn't bend that far anymore. And none of it's reflected in my medical record, because I just, just don't complain about those things when you're in. I have severe tinnitus from being the gunner on a Humvee, right? And always being around 50 cals and the really loud bangs and booms, right? So it's like, yeah, no, that's definitely some fantastic advice. And if you guys take anything away from this episode, right, go get checked out while you're in the service. Get it recorded.
Yeah, I think that, with this disorder support podcast and stuff, you guys are trying to, limit the stigma, remove some of the stigma of this. Don't get seen, don't get reported, don't get evaluated for your medical conditions. Most of us avoid the dentist. When I was in, we avoided everything medical related. We avoided the dentist, sick call, anything and everything. We just avoided because we're strong, tough, and getting through it together, and you just dealt with it, which isn't a problem. You got to deal with things, but just get it documented, because 10 years down the road, you're going to be looking back on your medical records and you're going to wish that they had properly documented your medical conditions. Your job is not supposed to change you. It's not supposed to change you physically, mentally. It's not supposed to put limitations on your movement, and you're not supposed to have chronic back pain or sleep apnea or some of the various conditions that I learned about, not only as a veteran but as a first responder and a paramedic. I respond to veterans throughout South Florida, and you see them and they're like, oh man, you think you're getting affected now. Wait till you're 40, 50, 60, and you're not keeping up with the other people your age,
Yeah,
and the thing is, what you're feeling now when you're young and you're in shape and you're in the service may not be what you're feeling 10 years down the road. But if you don't get it documented and it's not listed, you can kind of limit yourself to some of the benefits that are out here for you to get.
yeah,
So I think it's important.
it is. It is. So, before we transition on to the next question, Zach just texted me he has to take a shit, so we have to pause for 5 minutes.
You're good.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
So go do
I'm
that.
chilling.
Don't bring your phone with you because I don't want you on TikTok or fucking Instagram. Just go and hurry up.
No, I'm going.
Okay. There's a bathroom right next to where you're sitting.
No, I just, no.
He prefers the one upstairs.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
The one I know I
It's
shouldn't.
it's 12:09, so we gotta bang the rest of this out quickly because I gotta feed this baby still. I gotta fold laundry and I gotta go to sleep. I gotta wake up early. So
All right.
thanks for the fucking 5 minute, 35 minute intermission, Zach. So
15.
what were you
Oh,
timing
15
it?
minutes.
Were you timing it?
Where we leave off?
All right, so I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but I'm just gonna segue it anyway. Um, so, all right. So,
We
with that being
we were
said,
talking about we covered the gunsmithing. We covered
we're
the
going into question three. That's all I really know.
we had talked about traumatic. We had talked about traumatic stuff you see as a first responder.
Yeah, but we were past all
And
that. Anyway, we'll just
yeah,
I'll spice it in. It'll sound good. So, all right.
okay.
So with all that being said, Brian, what are some challenges that you face today that the military has kind of caused you to face, right? So it could be anything from like having insomnia, right, and being up all night when you don't want to be, right, on nights that you don't want to be, or it could be having a short fuse, which I definitely had when I got out, or it could be as bold as PTSD. What are some challenges you face today, and how do they hurt you? And then also, what are some things that the military has given you that helps you be successful in your current career?
That's a good question, Kyle. I think the military, you know, stays with us, obviously, right? Our military service is something that you'll carry with you throughout your life. It's uh, it's got positives and negatives attached to that. You know, one of the negatives I would say, uh, coming out of the military when you transition to the civilian world is there's a certain expectation that you have, right? You have this confidence, you have this, um, I guess you have this like an attitude that you carry with you, like, hey, I'm I'm a military service member. I don't know about you guys, but like when I see military service walk members walk by, or I see a military base and stuff, I'm so used to, like, I remember I used to just drive on that thing. Like, you still feel a part of that service, right? I don't feel like you'll ever lose that. You feel connected to those active duty service members, and you kind of feel like, hey man, that that was me. And as you stay civilian longer and longer, you'll become less and less of a thing that, like, people out here in the civilian world. I don't want to say they don't care, but 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 they don't even know. So you lose that, like, uh, you lose that feeling of belonging. You can end up feeling isolated or ostracized because you're no longer that active duty service member, but you're also never going to be a civilian again, a true civilian. You're going to be what we refer to as, obviously, a veteran, and veterans are their own type of people, right? There's a certain expectation that I have when I meet vets, right? Vets take care of other vets. We look out for each other. We try to steer you right. When I have a veteran come up to me and ask me for help or ask me for advice or stuff, you have a general expectation that that person is a decent human. You have an expectation that they're gonna go out of their way to help you, or they're gonna support you, and maybe you guys have seen like-minded things. At least that's what I felt, and I realized more and more I felt isolated because there's dark humor, right, associated with the military. Like I talked about, being a first responder and being trauma bonded. You are trauma bonded in the military because you face hard adversity. You overcome challenges daily. These problems that we see in the military. I don't know about you guys. I was responsible at 23 years old for millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment. I had faced, at least on 10 different occasions, things that I felt could have ended my life, from tsunamis to whatever it is, to military service, to combat challenges, different things you face, and you're not ready for, or you're getting exposed to, and you become desensitized to it. So, as I progressed and travel and transitioned into the civilian world, I realized that I wasn't like everybody else, and some of my dark humor or some of my things just didn't quite mesh the conversation, and it made you, like, cussing, like cussing. I used to cuss. I
It's
used to
big.
F this, F that, F this, ba 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 ba, and that was just like a normal thing. Like in the military, we're just like, oh no, F that. No, I don't really mean for you to go F yourself. Like I'm just telling you, like
Yeah.
F off, bro. That's
Yeah.
that's what it is. And it took me a long time to break those habits, break those things because you get judged for it in the civilian world. And most people, you know, aren't used to seeing the things that we see. They're not used to hearing the jokes that we joke about, the dark humor and stuff. And I've seen some struggling veterans that I'm friends with, that really make almost inappropriate jokes about death or killing or homicides or suicides or the times they experience in deployment. And I feel like veterans want to be open, but and people can say the civilians aren't ready to hear it or they're not ready to understand the truth of war or conflict or military service in general, the dark things that are associated with it. And there's a lot of positive, obviously there's a lot of good things that you learn in the military: trust, hard work, loyalty, um
So before I
understanding.
just want to interject for a second before you go on to the good stuff because I definitely want to hear it. I have a story. So not, I guess a couple of years after I got out, right? Like 4 or 5 after I
Are
got
you
out.
recording?
Yeah,
Okay.
a couple of years after I got out, like 4 or 5, I was with my wife now, but girlfriend at the time, and her family is huge on Disney. I mean, massive. They go once a year. That's a whole family thing. And we were pushing my nephew's stroller through the security gate to get into Magic Kingdom. And it was later at night. We were just going to watch the fireworks, and there was like no one there except for us. We were the only ones walking through security because it was later at night. And the guard is like, I don't know, this nerdy little security guard guy. He was just like, I don't know, he was weird. But he made a joke about something, and so I thought, okay, we're in a lighthearted mood. And the stroller's clearly empty. There's a kid sitting in the stroller and nothing underneath it. It's clearly empty. It's blind as day that it's empty. And he goes, all right, anything else I need to worry about in here? And I was like, besides the bomb and the AK down there, we're good. And he went from like, he had made a joke about something. So he went from like having a smile on his face to complete deadpan. And he was like, we don't make jokes like that around here. Okay, I'm really sorry. I am really sorry. And then we just pushed on, right? So we're walking from security to the entry point at Disney, which is maybe, I don't know, 100 yards or so, 200 yards. Before we knew it, we were surrounded by cops. I mean, surrounded by cops. And they walked me over to the parking lot where they ran my background and a bunch of other info. And the cop, luckily for me, the lead cop that was in charge of the whole situation was a veteran. I was like, "Hey man, look, I just got out of the military not too long ago. It was just a dark humor joke. I'm used to throwing around. I really didn't mean it in a negative light or anything like that." And he's like, he told me he was a vet, an infantry guy, and he got the joke. He thought it was funny, but just never do something like that at Disney again. And he's like, honestly, you're lucky you got me because if you got another cop that was a little stuck up, you would get on the banned for life list at Disney. And I just think it's funny. Like to me, it was a comical joke. Like obviously, there's nothing in here. You know what I mean? It's an empty stroller. They didn't. He didn't find it as funny as I did. But I ended up getting off scot free. But it's just one of those scenarios where it's like we have those dark humor jokes, right? Like I guess I could have said, "Oh no, there's just a second child under there." That would have been a funny joke for a civilian or whatever, right? Except the puppy dog I'm trying to sneak in or whatever. But my brain went right to the bomb and the AK that's hidden underneath the stroller. So we definitely carry that stuff with us outside of the military for sure.
I think, yeah, I think that's true too. There's like a huge disconnect from, you know, service members and civilians, right? A huge disconnect.
Yeah. So all right, so
Yeah.
cool. What are some of the positive things the military has given you that's made you super successful? Especially, I'm interested more in the trauma bonded stuff just because my brain is that fucked up. Um, but just from anything from the discipline or the loyalty. What are some of the positive things that's really helped you be successful since you got out?
Right. So, some of the positives that I've been able to take with me from the military services. I feel like I'm able to relate to the older generations that are still around in the workforce because nowadays people are having to work for longer and longer before retirement. Um, so with the military service, you kind of level up with these older generations and stuff that are still, working. I see they have a certain level of respect for you as a veteran, which helps, but it also, allows me to, because unfortunately, nowadays the people people aren't willing to wake up early and work extremely hard, extremely long hours, and that's something that we do in the military, and it's normal, working long days, long hours, putting there's a, that self-discipline to where it's like, hey, here's the mission, here's the goal, here's the plan, and we go with it. So a lot of workforces I feel like are dealing with issues with just employees in general. When you lay out a mission to a service member, you lay out a goal or an expectation, we follow it like law. We don't.
So
Whereas
is that like a culture thing
I
that you're
think so.
describing? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a culture around the military that, I don't know about you guys. When I was in the service, we didn't allow people to uh be dirtbags. We didn't allow people to just like whatever, not my problem. And we couldn't even fire anybody in the military. So we had to learn to work with everybody. I mean, obviously, people could face the UCMJ or court martial or different things like that for discipline, but it's not like the civilian world where you're not working out at an employer, they just fire you. In the military, we had to work with so many different types of people, so many different types of cultures, so many different age groups. Even though there was an average age in the military, it's just like you're exposed to so many different things.
Yeah.
I'm hearing like static. Hold on. Uh, it's my computer. Like
Is it overheating?
I guess,
An
yeah,
apple.
the
Better now?
fan kicked on. It was weird. Huh,
Well, I
I've
think
never heard that
honestly,
before.
I think we got enough from that point, right? I think you
Huh?
good.
Oh, we can keep going. I messed up with the thing. Or I just the fan like threw me off and never heard that. I thought it was coming from like you
Yeah.
guys from
No,
static.
we didn't hear it at all, or I didn't.
All
Zach
right.
I
didn't hear
can't
it.
I can't hear anybody over this fan that's on this computer.
My God, oh, a cry baby.
Sounds
All
like a
right.
jet engine.
So
It's
yeah,
because we build
I
them.
think that there's so I guess we'll restart. So yeah, I think that there's a culture associated with the military and stuff of hard work and dedication and putting a mission first, and there can be some negative connotations to that because when you transition to the civilian world, you need to remember to put your family first over work. And a lot of us in the military, we didn't have families when we got into it. Most of us get into it out of high school, 18, 19 years old. We don't have wife and kids and people counting on us and supporting us and things like that. So we're so used to, well, no, we put work first, mission
Wait,
always,
you're a
right? Before,
soldier
right.
24/7, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We used to have shirts in
Like,
fifth group that on the back we had our logo and a slogan, and the slogan was mission, team, self. Right. That's
Yep.
how that's what our slogan was, and it was like you need to go home for your child's birthday or your first son's birth. Right. No, mission's first, and even if you're not on an active mission, and your buddy needs help, team second. Sorry, self is third. Right, and that's the culture.
Right, and transitioning into the civilian world, many people do not put workforce. They put family first, which honestly it is the way it should
It
be.
is
For our own mental health and for
the
the
betterment of
future.
society. Yeah.
Yeah, the better. Yeah, it has to be that way. You have to put your family first because at the end of the day, whether you do 20 years in the military or 30 years at whatever career you choose to go after, uh, there's only so many people that show up to the funerals. Trust me, I've done over 500 veterans funerals, and the service members typically are not the ones that are there for you. It's your wife, your kids, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents. Those are the ones that are there, and they care about you and they support you, and you're, whether that
Brian,
you in family can be anybody. Hmm.
do you think there's like enough mental health resources in the military in general out there that are helpful, or have you like when you were in, did they actually explain them a lot to you, or not so much?
So as far as mental health resources available to service members, I think there's tons of programs that are there. But I think we have do such a poor job of accepting the fact that our friend or our battle buddy or service member that we're close to is going to face a mental health crisis or go seek help. I think there's tons of opportunities, but we put such a negative connotation that people are afraid to go get help, and then we judge people, right? Like, here's the thing, I've learned this in the fire service, and I learned it in the military. Two people can live through the same event and be totally impacted differently. You can't judge somebody based on what you thought was bad and what they thought was bad, right? If me and you watch the same car accident, it may affect me totally different, whether it be because there was a child in the car and I have an 8-year-old child at home, or maybe, the lady has blonde hair and your girlfriend has blonde hair, or she's got brunette hair or redhead or whatever it is. Maybe the blue eyes reminded you of your brother, and your brother had some traumatic thing happen to him in the past, or whatever it is. There are instances that people attach themselves to, instances that they go, oh man, that's a Toyota Tacoma, and my parents drove a Toyota Tacoma, or whatever it is.
Drive one
That's
too.
why you can't
Relevance.
judge. Well, you can't judge somebody, that you can't judge somebody on that. You have to allow them to deal with their own stresses, and not be so judgmental, and not force them to, isolate themselves, because that's what leads to that increase in
Yeah,
Hey,
suicide that
for
we're
sure.
how do
And
you how do you handle loss? Like, what is your like? How do you handle it?
so for me, I get when it comes to handling loss, like death and different things like that, or trauma in life. uh, I guess, I probably say that I handle it well, but also poorly, right? Because I compartmentalize a lot of things, which is actually, what people consider to be a negative thing, but it's a useful tool as a first responder, where when I'm dealing with something traumatic, like uh, somebody's dying in front of me, that unfortunately I have that happen quite often. Um, I'm able to take that traumatic thing that's happening to me and totally separate it and go, okay, this person's dying, but step one is I need to secure an airway. Step two is, once I secure this airway, I need to get their circulatory system working. I need to get them breathing, give them bag their lungs. I need to get them fluids. I need to get them whole blood. I need to fix problem A through Z. A, B, C, D. I just go step by step going through the problems, and then
see,
later on, I cope with it. But for me, as far as dealing with loss or a traumatic thing, I have found peace in the extracurricular activities that I've done outside of work, right? I think it's important to find an avenue that works for you to release that stress. I lean on my family support structure at home, my wife, my son he's too young to understand, but I hope that I'm able to speak to him about what my job is like. I've chose to go into, sports that I feel are healthy for me. I got into skydiving and scuba diving, and I got into paramotoring and paragliding, and I've got to travel with that, and vacation with my family. That tends to be how I deal with loss or stress or traumatic stuff.
So that's interesting. So you're able
Yeah.
to come up to a situation where someone's life is, well, literally in your hands, but literally fading in front of you. And for most normal people, that would be a really traumatic thing. And a good bit of veterans have dealt with that on the battlefield, right? And or even here at home with someone who's suicidal, who's a really good friend of theirs, right? And you're able to kind of flip a switch in your head that goes into process mode to fix a situation versus kind of the visceral, dramatic reaction, if you will. I don't mean dramatic in a bad way, but dramatic in the sense of I have to consume the emotions of this situation because it's really bad.
Yeah, it's kind of, a frowned upon saying, as a first responder, but we say things like, well, it's not it's not your emergency. And it's not that you don't want to be empathetic, and it's not that you don't want to care about that person's problem. It's that when you see families going through traumatic instances, right? Like I've walked into homes where I've had to tell parents, hey, your parent, your kid is not going to make it, or you got to tell kids that their parents have passed away. And this is all ages, right? This is a 60-year-old kid whose dad is 80 years old, and he can't process the fact that his dad is dying. And you're like, to me, right, someone who sees death every day, you're like, this guy's 89 years old. He's lived a long life. He's lived a healthy, successful life. He's got grandkids, he's got his family here supporting him, and yes, he's passing away, but he's lived a long life. Why is this guy sad? And you're not really, it's that desensitization. You're not seeing what he's seeing. He's seeing his dad that he grew up with and took him to t-ball practice and took him to his sports and his junior prom and his wedding and all these different things. You're seeing this guy's life fall apart, right? But if I sit here and get all emotional like his family is at the time, well then his dad's not getting the care that he really needs, right? He needs somebody to step in there and do, if there is a way to save them or if there's something that I can do, now's the time that needs to be done. And so I don't get that opportunity as a first responder when you're going to these traumatic calls to cope
Well,
with it right then.
I
You have to
think I
take it
think I
home.
speak for all of us when I say we're appreciative of folks like you, right? I don't know that there's very many of us out there that could do that. That's a tough gig. So thank you. That's a really tough
Yeah,
gig.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
we call that what your priorities of work. Basically, putting that instance first before your feelings and all their like personal motives to make sure that that person is taken care of.
yeah. All right. So listen, great interview. This has been an absolute pleasure and a fantastic first episode. I think. Um, So let's round it all off here with a little scenario, right? So right at the end here, just give me a quick little blurb on what you think would be the absolute priorities for somebody, right? So the scenario goes: Soldier Joe walks up to you, says, "Hey man, look, I've got a year to get out, and I have no clue what the fuck I'm gonna do when I get out. I don't know what I want to be, and I don't know what to do." What would you tell him if you had that quick 15-second elevator pitch? This is what you need to get in line.
yeah. The transition can be stressful. So if I had to elevator pitch uh, an active duty service member that has a year left in service, I would tell them to buckle down on their finances, right? Number one, top priority, buckle down on your finances. Tie up any loose ends. If you have a Corvette that has a 29% interest rate, you know, now's the time to bite the bullet and get rid of it, right? There are
That's my first
programs
car
in,
ever.
right? There's programs in the
That's what I was
military.
thinking when you said that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's yellow. Don't worry.
And he totaled it. Thank
It's a
God.
'74
He got rid of
Chevrolet.
it.
Dang. Well, there's programs in the military that aren't going to be available to you when you get to the civilian world. So, now's the time to unload the bad financial choices that you've made while you're in the service. Get whatever help you need to um, secure your financial future. I found it very useful to do the Dave Ramsey plan. Other people have found chase going to Navy finances. I'm sure our Army has financial support and different programs. Find an accountant to evaluate your spending and make sure that you have a plan for the future. But financial stability is crucial if you're going to get out. Financial stability is crucial. If you cannot financially support yourself, getting out can be very traumatic. It can be very hard. Money is not everything, but you need money to survive, especially in the civilian world when you don't have those additional resources that you had available to you in the military. So secure your financial future, number one. Once you've aligned your budget and secured your financial future, you need to make a plan. So if you don't have a plan, you need to start researching, go on Google, uh, research the different programs available, like the ones I named off earlier, troops to truckers, troops to teachers, whatever VA benefit, GI Bill school you choose to chase. There's thousands. You can go on the VA website and find yellow ribbon schools. You can find the program that interests you most, whether it be commercial pilot or you want to be a ACNR tech and you want to work on air conditioners and refrigerant and whatever you want to do. If you want to be a carpenter, there's programs. Figure out what programs, narrow it down to a list of 3 to 5 programs, figure out which one works best for you, and go for that goal. Make a goal. So once you've secured your finances and then you've arranged your plan, right? Speak to whoever you're going to go live with. If you're living by yourself, then you're in a different predicament. But if you're going to go live with family, set guidelines, expectations, figure out, how things have changed, right? Like I said, when I moved in with my mom, I lived there for 2 weeks because it was not the same. I thought I was going to be like coming back home like when I was in high school, like no big deal. No, sometimes people don't have a bedroom available and stuff anymore because they've turned it into a guest room and stuff. See what kind of living conditions you're going to have and then deal with that, right? Figure out if it's best to rent, if it's best to buy a home. Understand that rental properties have gone up in cost, right? So maybe you lived at a house and it was $1,000 for a 2-2 when you were living there, and now 5 years later, 8 years later, you're getting out of the military, and that same property is $2,500. So evaluate your living conditions. If it means you're gonna, live in a tent and stuff, well, maybe that's not the best decision. Maybe you need to find out, what your living conditions are gonna be. So financial, make a plan, living conditions, and then go after it with an open mind. Understand that the military gave you a lot of tools and assets and things, but there are limitations. Figure out what the career you're going to chase has, right? What expectations do they have of you? Are they gonna just give you a job because you're in the military, or are there certifications that you need to obtain? What are the starting salaries? Most of the time from the military, you are not gonna, if you're middle management in the military, you're an E5, E6, a chief, E7, whatever you are, that does not directly correlate in the civilian world unless you're chasing a government job. Those are the only ones that you're going to get those veterans preference points or
Like a
whatever.
GS
Yeah,
position.
like a GS job or some sort of government, uh, a paramilitary organization that you'll get some veterans preference points. But if you're just going to Joe Schmo's Crab Shack and you're like, hey man, I manage multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment. Let me
That's good
manage your
crab.
restaurant. Yeah, well, it's like, hey, I manage multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment. Let me manage your restaurant. And he's like, well, how much experience do you have in the restaurant industry? And you're like, well, I don't have any, but I've
Like,
been a
okay, you can
manager
be a
for
busboy.
8 years. And they
Mm,
go, okay, man, well, I got a busboy position or a hostess position, or I got a waiter position if you think you're up to it. But I don't have a manager. I'm not gonna make you a kitchen manager right now. I'm not gonna make you a restaurant GM just because you manage multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment.
yep.
I, I hate to say that they don't care, but you know, opportunity presents itself differently. It's okay. You can prove yourself at whatever company you choose to start at. Start at it. Get your foot in the door. It's much easier to move up at an organization once you're in it, than it is uh trying to jump up a few steps. A lot of the times that won't happen. And if you're not happy, if you start a career in the civilian world, you're not stuck there for 20 years. You can change. You can make
Yeah.
a decision and you can change. It's important to find a place that works for you. So if it means you're at a job for 1 year and then you jump to a different job and you jump to a different job until you find that career place that you choose to spend, a good portion of your time at building that 401k and for the future, because you most careers now don't have pensions, like the military or being a first responder. So
Now,
plan for the future.
Brian, so like I guess we didn't really get to touch this, but how fast did you enroll into the VA after leaving the service? Did you enroll like right away or?
So um, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because when I got out of active duty, I was on terminal leave for something like 60 or 70 days because I didn't get to use my leave while I was in the service. So while I was on terminal leave, I went to the VA because everybody said in TAPS class, and everybody said, "Oh, make sure you go to the VA and stuff."
Right.
And there's some things in the VA, right? You're gonna learn when you transition a C&P exam, right? Which is an exam. It's a medical evaluation that they're trying to determine if you have any kind of disabilities or any kind of issues from the military service. And this is why we spoke about earlier. It's important to get those things documented in your active duty record, right? Because as soon as you go out, and like I said, I had this negative connotation associated with a disability. I was very concerned about telling them the truth about conditions that I was dealing with when I transitioned from the military, because I thought it would affect me getting a job as a police officer or getting a job as a firefighter paramedic or getting a job as whatever I was gonna do. I was just worried. I was like, it's the government. They're gonna know, or it's gonna limit my opportunities, right? Like I thought, oh well, if you get a disability rating and it's 10%, they're not gonna let you work anymore. It's 50%, they're not gonna let you work. Like that's not true. Get hard factual information, because I left active duty and I immediately went to the VA, and I immediately had just come off a deployment, and they were like talking to me, trying to evaluate me. Sir, do you have anything going on? Da, 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 da. And I was like, nope, 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 just like I did in the military. Nope, nope, everything's fine. Nope,
I
nope,
did
nope,
the
nope, nope,
exact
nope,
same
nope,
thing.
nope, nope. And I screwed myself, because then when I went years later to try to start that process with, filing a disability claim or anything, it can really set you back. It can set you back because you you they tried to evaluate you and you told them no, because what did they tell you in the military? Everything's fine, you're good, no problems. You need to think about things on your worst days, right? When you're getting medically evaluated for a disability, it's not about how you're feeling every single day. It's about on your worst day, when you're dealing with the worst case scenario that you deal with. That's what they want to know. That's the information you need to be clear and not be afraid to share, because that's what's going to set you up for success. When it comes to transitioning and dealing with the VA,
Yeah.
right? Because there are things that you get for benefits using the VA, whether it be from your funding fee for your VA loan, a disability rating. You can get your property taxes covered. You can get college for your kids taken care of and stuff. You can get, obviously, we all get funerals paid for being a veteran, right? When you do 4 years and you're in active duty, and you've got an honorable discharge or anything other than dishonorable, I believe, you can get a military service paid for, at least the minimum paid for at any national cemetery. So there's a lot of benefits to being a veteran. You need to make sure you get educated on them and utilize them properly, and don't limit yourself by saying
I'm
absolutely
fine.
no
Yeah,
because
I'm
you're
fine.
concerned.
Agreed. All right. Well, listen, we could honestly talk about this for days on end. I'm pretty sure. But
Yeah, it'd be a no
really,
sleep podcast.
Yeah,
but
team no
really,
sleep, baby.
24
genuinely,
hours.
thank you for being on. Extremely insightful. A lot of good stuff. So, thank you. Really.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We appreciate it, Brian. Really do.
No worries, guys.
Yeah. So we'll post this episode. We'll let you know when it goes live. You can share, or not live, but live on the internet at that time. You could share it with any of your friends that you know might be.
I'm not sharing shit.
Well, there goes your third of the cut.
Going right to the fire department.
Right,
I'm gonna post it right to the fire department's Facebook page.
right, right. Well, that's why I'm not wearing fire department logos.
Is Brian
So
getting paid on his off time?
yeah. So all right, guys, thank you so much. We'll get someone scheduled. I think Zach got someone in mind for episode 2. By then, hopefully, we'll be a little more organized and our backgrounds will be cleaned up a little bit better and
I like my shoes in your background though. I don't know.
stop, better microphones, all that kind of jazz. But we're learning as we go. So thank you guys for watching if you've watched this far, and thanks for being
There
on,
ain't no way
Brian.
people watch this.
Thank you, Brian, for being on and your continuous optimism about our project. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Hey, bro. Later.
Bye.